Welcome back. We told you earlier a grand jury has indicted President Trump for the grand jury did not vote against any of the Trump indictment presented tonight by the Fulton County grand jury. Fannie Wills, we're still waiting for the actual indictment to be made public and find out exactly who is named and what the charges are. But there is an expectation the former president is one of those named in the indictments. Mr. Ramaswamy, as president, you will have some tough choices to make, which brings us to our next question from Carolyn Morell, retired office manager in New Hampshire. And she has a question about the previous federal indictments against the former president.
Good evening. You said as president, if Trump was convicted, that you would pardon him. In doing so, how would you expect to work with Congress that is so divided already?
Look, I think that we have a major task ahead of us in reuniting this country. And I thank you for highlighting that major issue. One of the main reasons why I think it's really important to me that we actually do pardon Donald Trump, who is an opponent of mine in this election. I think I'm going out of my way to say it precisely because he is an opponent. We have to stand on the side of principle. We have to move forward as a country. I think if we remain a nation where whoever's in power is using police force against its political rivals, that's a dangerous downward slide for a nation. And I think that Congress, that's probably going to be one of the last places we see national unity. But I think where we're going to see national unity first is bubble up from we the people. I would venture to say, I've been to Manchester, New Hampshire many times. I love visiting you guys in the Granite State. If you think about your neighbors or your colleagues or your classmates, I think most of them believe in the same values that this nation was founded on. Free speech, self-governance, meritocracy. I think you believe that most of them do too. But you can't be sure anymore because we don't feel free to talk about it. So once we're able to start talking openly, we will realize that this country is far more united than the media or social media will have us believe. I think at the top, it takes a president who says, we're done with the bickering. We're done with the weaponization of police power. We're moving forward as one nation. And once the president's able to do that, we set a national tone where I have full faith in the people of this country to take care of the rest.
All right. Carolyn, you think he's up to it?
Pardon me?
I think we are having a little bit of an issue communicating with you in New Hampshire. Let's sort of unpack what this would involve of pardoning Donald Trump. Obviously, the Georgia stuff is outside the realm of what a president could do. But you've been all over the map, really, about Donald Trump. And I know in the past, you sort of blew
I
off
don't
the
think
question.
so, actually.
Okay, well, we'll see. You've said that this passage I'm about to read from your book, you were joking. I've read it. Didn't sound like you were joking.
I didn't say any of these things, but that's okay.
It was a dark day for democracy. I'm reading the passage from your book, talking about January 6th. The loser of the last election refused to concede the race, claimed the election was stolen, raised hundreds of millions of dollars from loyal supporters, and considering running for executive office again. I am referring, of course, to Donald Trump. How is that someone who you can still say is a man who you would respect and believe is an advisor and a man of honor and commitment to the America that you say is so important from 1776?
Yeah, so first of all, that passage from the book was an identical quote where Donald Trump was actually filled in for Stacey Abrams, and we juxtaposed the two paragraphs. But put that to one side. That doesn't matter. The real point is we're all human beings. Okay, we're not a nation of gods. We're not governed by gods. We're governed by flawed human beings. All of us are flawed human beings. But a bad judgment is not the same thing as a crime. Would I have made different judgments than Donald Trump made? Absolutely, I would have. I will remind you that I'm running for U.S. president to lead our nation forward because I believe I am the best positioned individual in this race to do it. But I think separately, it is a bad precedent that we set when we try to lock up those political opponents. That's bad for the country. And it's my view that, yes, Donald Trump was a successful president, at least made progress on the border crisis, the first president to recognize openly in either major political party the threats posed by China. I think his defeat of Hillary Clinton was probably the most important political milestone of the 21st century, possibly in my lifetime. We did not have a major war. We were not marching towards a major war, as we are potentially now. We were potentially on the brink of one for North Korea at the time that Barack Obama left us with that mess. And so, yes, I judge a president by the results. Does that mean he's perfect? Of course he's not. And I think there are areas to improve. But that is a very different statement than saying that he should be prosecuted for a wide array of crimes, which I think is not good for this country. And so, yes, I stand on the side of principle.
All right. So political prosecution's not good for the country. Day one, you're going to pardon Donald Trump.
I will.
Okay. Reasonable people could probably agree that if Hunter Biden was Hunter Smith, he would not be being charged with these two tax charges and certainly not being charged on the gun charge, and certainly wouldn't have a special prosecutor looking into him.
I'm going to just stop you right there on this one point. I don't think that that's what reasonable people would say. I think reasonable people would say that this guy who's underqualified even to hold a job at a local fast food chain is somehow earning millions of dollars sitting on the board of a Ukrainian energy company with no expertise in the energy sector and using him trading on his father's name to enrich his family, the same country that is now getting $200 billion of taxpayer aid when that same father's president. So I think that's what
if we
reasonable people would say.
Are to bring all true, and I would agree with that. If we are to bring America together on day one, if you're going to pardon Donald Trump and principle is more important and bringing America together is more important, why wouldn't you also pardon Hunter Biden?
Well, here's my view on this, and I've been very clear on this. There can be no reconciliation without truth. That Hunter Biden laptop story, with a lot of those bribes, was censored systematically on the eve of the 2020 election. That is wrong. That is a stain on our national history. Now we have a U.S. president that is inexplicably providing hundreds of billions of dollars to our money to the very nation whose state-affiliated company bribed that president's family member, his own son. So we have to get to the bottom of it. I support that. But here's what I will say, Leland, is that as U.S. president, when I get to January 21st, 2025, my second day in office, after I've pardoned Donald Trump, after I've pardoned many of the other victims of politically motivated persecutions through prosecution, after we've won in a landslide election, are on our path to reunite this country and lead this nation forward, am I going to be focused on the Biden family, or am I going to be focused on American families throughout this country? I choose focus on American families. And so that's going to be my agenda, not pursuing a politicized prosecution either. And that's where I stand on the side of principle.
When you say, though, not focused, does that mean you tell your attorney general, we're done, let's move on? Or does that mean that if the attorney general wants to investigate...
I think we need to get to the facts. I think we need to get to the facts. There can be no reconciliation without truth. The view of the police state
how are we going to get to the facts if it's not your priority?
Well, we have to ultimately, I do support an impeachment inquiry on Biden for these charges, especially as it relates to the funds being sent to Ukraine now, which are a repayment of a bribe. I do support vigorous investigation into Hunter Biden's dealings. We cannot have a government where foreign adversaries are buying and effectively paying for policies from our U.S. presidents as puppets. That's unacceptable. So I do support the investigations in getting to the bottom of the truth. But why are we even having a conversation about pardons when there hasn't even been an indictment of Hunter Biden, when there have been 3 to 4 now against Donald Trump? So that's the real question.
This will get us to the lightning round, and I will start right there. So I'll say a phrase, words, whatever, give me a quick answer. First thing, it sounds a little bit like you think Trump would be convicted if you'd say you'd pardon him.
I don't necessarily know that. That's going to be up to the jury.
Okay.
But if he is convicted of these politicized prosecutions in the interest of moving this country forward, yes, I will pardon him.
All right. So future answers even shorter.
Okay.
All right. Here we go. Lightning round. Vladimir Putin. First words that come to your mind.
We can trust him to follow his self-interest, but he is not a friend to this nation.
Zelensky.
Fraud.
No. Direct. That's the most direct answer you've given all night.
You said short.
Right. There we go. All right. You have 2 sons. Daughter's name if you had one.
We haven't really thought about that, actually. Maybe Lakshmi.
All right. Does that have some certain meaning to you?
It does, yeah. She's in our faith, a symbol and goddess of prosperity.
All right. Say something nice about President Joe Biden.
I think he loves his son. And I'm not saying that lightly. I think he's a father who loves his son. And that small element of a deeply flawed man, I can still respect that.
All right. Do you think he is at least trying hard or just trying for himself?
I think he is barely capable in making decisions as a human being at his age. It's a form of elder abuse, what they're really putting him through. It's really the managerial class pulling the strings of their puppet. Joe Biden's just a puppet.
All right. Giorgia Meloni, Prime Minister of Italy.
Strong, good, like her, met her, gave her a copy of Woke Inc. I hope she read it.
Did you hear back from her after you gave it to her?
I can't remember, actually. Both of us have been kind of busy. But I support a leader who stands for the national identity of her nation. What we're missing in this country is a national leader who stands for the identity of our nation. That's what I'm bringing to the table.
All right, you are from Cincinnati. I am from St. Louis. We are in Chicago. I'm sure there's some jokes to be made about the Cardinals, the Reds, and the Cubs, but I'll refrain just for a minute. Favorite flavor of Grater's ice cream?
I like, well, that's a pretty good one. Cookies and cream is pretty good.
Cookies and cream, that's basic, not black chip raspberry.
Sometimes you got to start with the fundamentals.
All right, there we go. What is more likely, Bengals going back to the Super Bowl or the Reds to win the World Series?
I like the Bengals going back to the Super Bowl. Unfinished business. And so my whole life I had a dream the Bengals were going to win the Super Bowl. When they finally made it, I said we're going to go all the way to L.A. and watch it. They ended up losing on the final drive. So I still have hope.
All right. Well, hope is a nice place to end this town hall. It's something you're trying to provide America. I know. As a reminder, at the start of the evening, we asked how many of you were undecided on who you would support in the Republican primary. So, once again, by a show of hands, who here, and we'll include our audiences in Des Moines and Manchester, is more likely to vote for Mr. Ramaswamy? All right. What about Manchester? Okay, we're going to try to zoom in here. It looks about half in Manchester, third in Manchester. Des Moines, Iowa. Who's more likely after hearing Mr. Ramaswamy? All right, half there, and then we got about 2/3 here in Chicago. We'd like to thank our audience here in Chicago. You all have been great. Des Moines, Manchester, thank you. You all will be caucusing and voting here in the next 5 or 6 months. At home, the conversation is just beginning on social media. Use the hashtag #VivekTownHall. And with that, we thank you, Mr. Ramaswamy. This has been excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Pleasure.
you for having me, and thank you all for the honor.
Thank you. You got it.
We'll see you out on the campaign trail.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. My friend Chris Cuomo is standing by to critique both of us, I think. That's what the post game is for.
Hopefully more of you.
I'm
just kidding.
There's a lot to critique. We'll turn it over to him. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.